Thank you very, very much for having me tonight. In seeing pictures of the exhibition and the process of printmaking and some of the text I was told regarding everything that kind of came together cumulatively tonight, I decided the best way to sort of honor a lot of these things was to bring a very different setup than what I'm used to. I normally play clavier, guitar, basso, and am an orchestra composer, but I wanted to blend a bunch of different instruments that don't seem like they should fit together. So I have a string Japanese taishigoto running through effects pedals that are similar to punk rock bands and stuff like that. I have a very goofy instrument called an omnichord, which is kind of a kid's instrument with chordal patterns and little beats. And then I have these Bluetooth keyboards called Roly instruments that are these 5-dimensional touch-tone keyboards that I have programmed with orchestra samples, theremins, electric guitars that I can play in a variety of ways. And so I thought the goal tonight was to create a nice hybrid of all these seemingly disparate sounds. So this is something that during the pandemic, I found myself trying to find zither instruments from all over the world that were relatively cheap. And so I found a version of this at like a Flohmarkt for like 10 euro. And then I saw, whoa, there's an electric version of this and it's not too expensive. So I was able to get this for under 100 euro. And the layout is basically you have a drone, which is G, and then all of these pitches are also G. And then the layout here is like a keyboard, like a piano. So if this was an open G, that would be A. So you tune it based on what the drone instrument is. So this is just, every culture has some variation of this instrument. In India, it's the bulbul tarang. In Hungary, it's the Hungarian zither, has those like wooden, has those with the same kind of layout. We would have auto harps or marxophones in America, and it just seemed that this was a popular style of instrument in many different cultures. So I tend to like this one because it's electric, and I can run it through effects pedals, guitar effects pedals. So basically, I have what's called a pitch bender. So I can go from here up 2 octaves. And then I'm running every single thing through a vocoder, auto harmonizer, and reverb machine. This is a fairly cheap pedal from Roland. So what I can do with this is run it through here. This was a popular instrument in the 70s called an omnichord, which was sort of like a simple beat maker, and then you have these chords that you can hit. Oh wait. It's like a kid's instrument from the 70s, and what you have is basically different rhythms. Country, bossa nova. So you can play here Roberto Pasquale or Jovino Saxoneto. And then these are the chords. Yeah, so you're controlling the chords. fun toy that I feel like has no place in any kind of performance like this. So of course I brought it along to try it out. Omnichord, yeah. And so this is the new sort of reissue of it. Feel free to try anything out if you'd like to. If you want to think this through. And then this is a company that was originally in Brooklyn that I used to make videos for demoing these things. And these are what are called 5-dimensional touch keyboards that are run via Bluetooth controller off of an iPad. So I have nothing plugged in. But I have all of these samples. And basically I have a legato orchestra here. And then what you're able to do is, depending on how hard you hit it, but I have thousands of sounds here, thousands of sounds. And this is just what I chose for today. This one, I have set up like a theremin. Can you see theremin? Oh wait, this is the electric guitar, yeah. So it's the theremin was one of the first electric instruments ever built that measures your electromagnetic frequency, and you don't actually play. The closer you get to it, the higher the pitch is, and this is sort of like whenever you would watch horror movies and you'd hear like that was always, what's going on here? Yeah. So that sample, and then I'm able to move it from here, an electric guitar. So you play all your Eddie Van Halen and... But it's really fun as a keyboard player to be able to have this control that I would have on guitar or bass with like bending strings. You can do, yeah, give it a whirl. You're free. Anna. And then this will have different drum sets I'll put. So